All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our virtual town hall meeting, which will be focused on small businesses and how small businesses are dealing with the extraordinary pressures that they're facing in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. Uh, I think by last count, we have about 38 registered participants, and that's, I think, a great response from our community. So I'd like to welcome each and every participant and thank you for taking the time out of your day to log in tonight. Hopefully, you'll take something valuable away from the program. We're lucky enough to be joined by our local member of provincial parliament and also the Solicitor General for the province of Ontario, Sylvia Jones, as well as our federal member of parliament, Kyle Seeback. So both Sylvia and Kyle, I think, have some remarks that they'd like to make, and then we do have a series of questions that were submitted by the participants that are registered. So we'll go through those. I'll field those to the two members, and then if we have time at the end, we'll see if we can maybe squeeze in a few extra questions if there are any from the group. So not wanting to waste any time here, let's get it rolling right away. So I'll turn it over to MPP Jones, and you can sort of walk us through your experience from the provincial perspective, as well as give some insights as to the sorts of small business supports that are being offered by your government.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Mills, and thank you for hosting this. It's a really important opportunity for us to first talk about how all three levels of government have been working together basically since the beginning of the pandemic, and to highlight in particular some relatively new programs that are up and running, and I really am wanting to encourage your small businesses to apply for. I don't think that there is anyone who doesn't appreciate and understand how difficult this has been for small business, for families, for kids going to school, learning to learn remotely. All of those challenges added together have made for, frankly, 9 months of a lot of hard work for everybody and a lot of stress. What we have done at the provincial level is particularly related to one thing I wanted to highlight was the Ontario Small Business Support Grant Program. The portal is open now, and I'm actually really pleased to hear an update as recently as today where small businesses are already applying. I am hearing that it can take as little as 20 to 30 minutes to do the entire application. If you're having any challenges, please reach out to my office at 519-941-7751. And the one piece of advice that I've been given from if you're going into the portal is have your legal business name and your CRA business number. And as I say, if you need any help, please reach out to my office. The thing that I like about this portal is that all of the provincial grants are all in one place. So you don't have to go one place for energy rebate. You don't have to go to another place for small business incentives like PPE, personal protective equipment. It's all in one place. And I'm looking forward to sharing some more details on the vaccine rollout later on today, because at the end of the day, that's what's going to allow us to open up and get back to normal as soon as possible. So thank you again and look forward to your questions.
Great, thank you. Kyle, do you want to give some thoughts on the federal perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. There are a number of federal programs that have been out there to help both individuals and businesses. I'm not going to go through the whole list of those. I've done those. I think most people are aware, but if you do have any questions, please get in touch with my office. My phone number is 941-1832, and that's a 519 number. We are experiencing real challenges at the federal level right now with respect to the delivery of vaccines. It's something I think people might want to talk about tonight. We've learned that Pfizer will not be delivering any vaccines next week. This is very challenging right now, as it's our best weapon to get us back to normal living. What I do want to say, and I've said this at many town halls, is I'm really proud of the resilience of people all throughout the riding of Dufferin-Caledon, whether that's individuals who have stood up to help their neighbors and their friends and families in need, businesses that are finding ways to continue to struggle and survive during this hard time. I'm really impressed and proud of all the hard work that everyone's doing. I'm also proud of the hard work that all levels of government are doing, whether that's our provincial government that I know is working hard, and whether that's our municipal governments that are doing really, really great work to try and make sure that everyone is able to come through this as healthy and strong as possible. And I look forward to answering any questions you have tonight on federal issues.
Great. Okay, so with that, we'll jump into the questions that have been submitted. So the first question goes to MPP Jones. The question has to do with closures of small businesses, and it's asking essentially why small businesses are the first to be closed when restrictions are rolled out, rather than larger retails, particularly when the larger retailers have been shown that they don't always act the most, or act in the most appropriate way, and that we have seen some confirmed cases from some of the larger big box stores. So why has the focus been on small businesses?
Yeah, it's a good question, and frankly, it's a lot of the conversation and debate that happens in Cabinet and caucus. So all of our decisions in terms of closures, whether schools remain open, which businesses remain open, are really driven by the health table, the Chief Medical Officer of Health. At the core, a lot of it is dependent on the essential goods and services. So food, pharmacy, doctors' offices, access to that. And then after that, it's really in an attempt to limit people's travel. And what we have discovered is that when you open more opportunities for people to go out and go into businesses, you're actually encouraging them to move around more. So the big box, the Walmart, Costco, the example that is always raised, has been the most challenging. And part of it is we don't want people going from place to place to place and interacting. And so the Chief Medical Officer of Health and the Health Table recommended that we take this approach. Having said that, we understand that this can lead to some unfairness. And so what we have done, and what we are doing at the Ministry of Labor with labor inspectors, is limited their number of people to 25%. And as you've probably heard, we have the Ministry of Labor has labor inspectors going out to those big box stores. They're calling them blitzes, and making sure that they're adhering to those rules. And if they are not, they are placing fines, and that has been happening. The Premier Ford often says that there's nothing fair about COVID. One of the accommodations that we have tried to do was to keep the curbside delivery in place, so that people who want to choose to shop local still have that option. And we have also funded small businesses so that they can tap into improving their online presence if that wasn't something that they had done pre-COVID. I couldn't agree with you more that these are very, very unfair, challenging decisions to be made. But at the end of the day, we have to keep as many people working from home, staying in place as possible. And that was one of the reasons why we were driven to limiting how many people could go in, but still giving access. Because the other thing we don't want is the perception or a concern that there were going to be food shortages. So all of those pathways from farm to grocery, as they say, had to be protected in order to protect our food supply and our medical supply chain. Thank you.
As sort of a follow-up to that, Sylvia, just to drill down a little bit further, the question is, many small businesses may only see, upwards of 100 people a week. Whereas the larger big box stores, it's, I think we've all seen the pictures online and through social media, crowded Costco's with, probably 200 plus people in a store at one time. So how is your government sort of, wrestled with that aspect of things, actual capacity in stores at one time when you look at small businesses versus larger retailers?
Yeah, it's really the movement between the stores. So if we took the downtown of Shelburne and had all of those stores open and all of them allowed to have 25% capacity or 100 people over the course of a week, that's a lot of movement in between stores and between customers and clientele and staff. So it was really protect them, the most critical supplies, which was the food and medical, but also try to discourage, without curfews, people from traveling unnecessarily, going into multiple stores. And again, the bridge, if people want to buy local, and they should be, that option is still available with both the curbside pickup as well as, of course, delivery. A lot of small businesses have pivoted and are doing direct home delivery. Those are consumer behaviors that we've focused a lot of in Dufferin Caledon. Even pre-pandemic, we've talked about buy local, shop local, but that is the consumer behavior that we're trying to encourage. Buy those local products, reach out to those local stores so that they're there post-pandemic. Thanks.
Thanks, and I think that's a good point. And I know a number of our local small businesses have tried aggressively to change their models. Going back to March and April. Shifting. Thinking particularly of some of the local restaurants. Shifting from the traditional dine-in model to more of a takeout model. And I know that the community's trying to support that as much as possible. But at the end of the day, I'm not sure that it fully supplements what they were drawing in the beginning. But your point is a good one, that I think there's a certain responsibility on the community too to try to get behind our local businesses as much as possible, and try to continue to buy what we can locally, even if that means that we're doing it in non-traditional ways.
Yes, and the other thing that we've done particularly to assist the restaurants, because I think most of us would agree that they've probably been the most impacted in terms of their bottom line, is allowing them to sell that bottle of wine with the entree or the dinner that they prepared for takeout. So we have made some changes provincially to try to encourage that buy local, go to your local favorite restaurant and order a takeout and a bottle of wine or your bottle of beer, as well as the actual food items.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. So next question's for MP Seeback. What are the possibilities of the government requesting any aid back from the recipients in the future once they've received it? The person that submitted this question has heard that a number of small businesses have been asked to repay either all or a portion of some of the supports that they received earlier in the pandemic. And through this participant's research, it's indicated that it seems difficult to find any information about that. So I think the question really is getting at what is the risk of the government, requiring recipients to pay funds back after presumably they've received it and spent it.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I think for the average person who was laid off from work or had to stop working because of COVID, they're, as long as they earned more than $5,000 worth of income, they don't run any risk of asking for CERB to be repaid. They will be taxed on CERB, and that was something that the government told people. You will be taxed on your CERB benefits. Where we've run into the challenge right now is that the threshold of the $5,000 worth of income. It was put out there as if you have $5,000 worth of income, you're eligible for CERB. Well, what's happened is that CRA has now interpreted that for businesses, not for individuals. Anyone who's in business, this is a net income of $5,000, not a gross income of $5,000. So some people who just assumed if my business made $5,000, I'm fine, I'm eligible for these funds, they are now being caught up in this. And the real problem with this was not communicated well by the government. They did not tell people that it's your net income if you're in business. So if you had a year where you decided to invest a lot of money in perhaps equipment or other things, and therefore all those investments brought your income below $5,000, CRA is now saying you are ineligible for CERB and you have to pay it back. The good news on this, and there's not a lot, is the Prime Minister was clear on this. He said that he wants CRA to work with individuals who have been requested to pay the money back. Work with them, find solutions, don't be aggressive. So the problem was the lack of clarity in the policy. I think the better decision for the government should just be to tell CRA that if you had $5,000 worth of income in your business, gross or net, you are eligible for CERB, instead of trying to determine you had a bad year so you don't get CERB, even though you couldn't work. That's the fair interpretation from my perspective. And that's one thing certainly I'm pushing in Parliament right now, and my colleagues are as well, to get the government and the Prime Minister to recognize this and make that change. Because we're now in a second lockdown and people's incomes are affected. And now CRA is saying, not only is your income reduced this year, you owe us money for last year. And I think the Prime Minister's got to fix that.
Yeah, I mean, two things that come to mind. One, it sort of makes a bad situation even worse for a number of people. And secondly, it may actually discourage some people from taking part in programs that they're, entirely eligible for, just for fear of the fact that, if I get this money and spend it, what are the odds that in 6 months CRA is going to be knocking on my door asking for, all or a portion of it back. So yeah, so I think you're right. I mean, more clarity at the front end certainly would help, and trying to work with these people going forward, because man, that's tough.
Back in my days as a lawyer, I'm stretching my brain back to law school, but in contract law, we used to say that ambiguity in a contract is construed against the drafter. So the federal government drafted these provisions. They were ambiguous and they should be interpreted against the government. And if anyone were to go to court and try and say I shouldn't have to pay it back, they can take that argument and it's free of charge. But on a serious note, if anyone is having this issue, please get in touch with my office. We will advocate aggressively on your behalf with the government that you should not have to pay back your CERB benefits. And again, my number 941-1832.
Okay, great. So then the next question is for both, and it may be difficult to answer, but we'll ask it anyways and offer your thoughts. When does the government, I guess both provincial and federal, see small businesses being put back into operation?
Well, I can take a shot at that. It's pretty much a daily conversation that we have in Cabinet with the Chief Medical Officer of Health as we study the COVID numbers, positivity rates, but frankly, more disturbing as we look at the hospital capacity. The UK variant is disturbing. What we are learning is it tends to be able to be transmittable more easily to a younger age group. However, if there is a positive, it doesn't seem to be any more serious in terms of what the health repercussions are. So it seems to be the same as what we have already experienced, which of course is the older that you are, the more likely that you have very serious and unfortunately sometimes deadly consequences for getting COVID-19. So the short answer is no magic ball to predict, but much of the material that we are reviewing and looking at is what are the ways that we can open and reopen safely. So for those businesses lucky enough to be able to continue to operate because they primarily sell grocery food items, for example, each one of those businesses now has to have a safety plan in place. And back to the Ministry of Labor inspections, they go in and they walk through those safety plans to make sure that they are protecting both your staff and your customers. All of those pieces together is where we're going to get to a place where we can start to reopen, probably gradually, frankly, in a measured way. You probably heard the announcement today, Mayor Mills, that there are some communities, some public health regions in Ontario that are going to be allowed to open their schools, while others, because of the high rates of COVID in their communities, cannot. So those types of things will lead us back to a gradual reopening. But if you're looking for a date, I wish I could give you one.
Yeah. And is it safe to assume that it will sort of be done on a regional health unit basis, similar to the schools? So I mean, as Wellington, Dufferin, Guelph sort of gets to the numbers we need to be at, then we'll be included in that.
Yeah, I think that's a very safe assumption. We've started to see that with Northern Ontario, with very low rates, has been able to reopen some of their amenities that other parts of the province have yet to have access to. Of course, today's announcement with certain school boards within 7 public health units are now going to be able to reopen on Monday. And, the big game changer, frankly, will be access to the vaccines. And just if I can speak very quickly to that, because I am co-leading the vaccine rollout with the Minister of Health and General Rick Hillier, that is going to be the biggest opportunity for us, first to protect our long-term care residents, staff, and essential caregivers, and ultimately allow our communities to come back to a more normal state of being able to get together in person as opposed to virtually.
Okay.
Thank you.
And just on that point, there was just a question that popped up in the chat there that I saw, and the questioner, points to the fact that there are only 2 active cases currently being reported within the town of Shelburne proper. But I'm assuming, Sylvia, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the decisions at your level are being made, more broadly than just at the municipal level, and you're looking at the entire health unit region. So even though Shelburne may only have 2 cases, you're looking at the entire Wellington, Dufferin, Guelph health unit region. That's
exactly right, Mayor Mills. So, for example, there was unfortunately a death in Dufferin County today. So there has historically been some conversations previously about could we subdivide within local public health units. The reality is that the vast majority of Ontario citizens, and we have the data to back this up, are traveling between health units. So even splitting the riding, the town of Caledon in Peel is in a different public health unit that has frankly had experienced outbreaks for much longer than to the north of Highway 9 in Wellington, Guelph, Dufferin. But we also know from cell phone data that people are moving in between regions. And actually, when one neighboring region gets locked down, what happens is it drives people into other communities. So that's why we have to be very careful and strategic about. We don't want to get into a case where we're micromanaging one little island to be able to stay open, because all it does is drive people into that region who are from other hot zones.
Right. Okay. Do you want to take a stab at that one, Kyle? Just and any predictions as to when small businesses may be open?
No, I mean, I can't add more. Sylvia has far better access to the data that's going on, certainly provincially and within the health units. It's mostly a provincial issue along with the health units. We do have to comment. I will comment on vaccines, and um, the federal government's response has been great in many ways. I give credit for getting CERB money out to people very quickly. That was fantastic. But they have dropped the ball on vaccines. If you look at the numbers that are coming out from other countries, we've vaccinated right now about 1.4% of the Canadian population. The US has got close to 5%. Great Britain, I think, close to 6%. And this is not the provinces not getting the needles into arms. This is the fact that we do not have the supply of vaccines. And I will be back in Parliament on Monday. And I can tell you, we will be pushing the government to do everything they can to increase the supply of vaccines, because it is critical to the reopening of our economies and our businesses.
Okay. All right. So the next question goes to you, Kyle, and it has to do with international travel. I've certainly seen this question crop up quite prominently on social media, and I know that I've been asked a number of times to try to rationalize it too. Why is it that we're still allowing international travel while at the same time we're asking our small businesses to close their doors?
I have no good answer for that. Again, people are going to think I'm just being very negative towards the federal government, but this is another area where they have absolutely dropped the ball. We have been calling for stricter measures at airports for a very, very long time. In fact, when things first started happening, the outbreak first started happening a little under a year ago. Sorry, is it over a year ago? Under a year ago. We were calling for the stop of international flights from China because that's where the origin of the virus was. And so that was never, of course, heeded for months and months and months. I know Premier Ford has been asking the federal government to do something because so many flights are landing in Pearson. I think the numbers I have seen is that 70 flights in January already have landed in Canada with people infected with COVID-19. So as we're trying to contain the virus here through strong measures, we're allowing people to fly here and do this. And it's a failure on multiple levels. The airline industry is asking for rapid tests that can be performed to make sure people with COVID aren't getting on flights. Rapid tests when people are arriving here. So if they test positive, they can be quarantined. And there's so many steps the federal government could be taking, and they're not taking them. And it's really, it's making it tougher for the provinces to contain the spread of COVID, and it's failing Canadians. I'm not sure much more we can do. We have raised this issue dozens and dozens and dozens of times in Parliament, and there just really has not been action from the federal government.
And if I may, Mayor Mills, it is actually a file that as Ontario Solicitor General, I've been working pretty actively on with Minister Blair, trying to get the testing at the GTAA. Pearson and the airport was embracing it and willing to do it. And it wasn't until a couple of weeks ago that we were finally able to get even that small piece of allowing testing on site, because of course it is a federal, the airlines are federal jurisdictions. So Kyle's absolutely right. I mean, the only reason the UK variant is coming in is through flights. And there have been many opportunities in these past 10 months to do a better job of screening. Calgary Airport has had a pilot project to test people coming in to the country for a couple of months now. And we have been asking for that since November. And as I say, it wasn't until a couple of weeks ago that we were finally able to get a small pilot happening at Pearson, which is a good thing because, of course, Pearson is the #1 airport for international visitors to Canada, but incredibly frustrating when that simple pathway couldn't be more tightly regulated and controlled. Thank you.
Not to dive, too far down the rabbit hole of, constitutional division of powers and whatnot, but understanding that that certainly is within the federal sphere of jurisdiction. Once passengers land, at Pearson, that they're obviously within the province of Ontario. Is there anything that can be done at a provincial level to sort of manage, how those people are then entering into the community?
So lots of different pathways were being discussed because, as I said, the GTAA, the airport itself, is embracing this, right? Because if there's safe travel, then that actually opens up their industry. So one of the things that we were looking at, if the federal government wouldn't let us test on site, was to actually physically be outside. But for anybody who's been to Pearson, there are multiple exit and entry points, and even that becomes challenging. You're basically on the highway before provincial jurisdiction kicks in. So happy that we have the very small piece that we have, but UK and now rumors about a different variant coming from Brazil continue to be very disturbing because it just makes it more complicated for us trying to deal with it locally within our provincial boundaries. And just to close off one, because you did raise the constitutional piece, Ontario has not, up till this point, in any way curtailed interprovincial travel, because again, that falls under federal jurisdiction. Work pretty closely with our Manitoba neighbors and our neighbors on the other side, Quebec, but still disturbing, particularly when you see those high numbers in our neighboring US states.
Yeah. Kyle, just before we leave this question, is there anything that residents from the riding can offer you in terms of support for your advocacy on this? I mean, if somebody feels really strongly about this, how can they back you up?
I always believe that the number of voices added to an issue adds so much strength. So if people want to send an email to Bill Blair and to Prime Minister Trudeau, that would be fantastic, demanding that more gets done at our airports, whether that's testing, whether that's stopping international travel. The government needs to know, they need to hear those voices. My preference is for testing so that we don't completely destroy our airline industries.
Right.
But send that message loud and clear.
Okay. All right. So the next question goes to Sylvia, and it's kind of a lengthy one, so bear with me. I'll read it through. It provides some context before it gets to the question. The Financial Accountability Office of Ontario released its report in December, which said the Ontario government had a combined remaining balance of $8.7 billion in funds meant to provide COVID relief. The report also stated that the province can't spend this money directly. Instead, it has to transfer it to authorized government programs for it to be used. And if those funds aren't used by the end of the fiscal year in March 2021, they will go to reducing Ontario's deficit. So the question is, why is the Ontario government holding back funds that could be used to support struggling businesses?
Sorry, I knew I'd do it, the famous mute button. So I'll start with, because our fiscal year in Ontario doesn't end until March 31st. So we had to be prudent about how we were spending it and how we were dividing it out. So I'll go back to just one program. This Ontario Small Business Support Program has $1.4 billion set aside for direct small business grant programs. That's one program. We have announced and invested $351 million on 2,500 2,200, my apologies, 2,200 new hospital beds. So those could have been beds that were in existing hospitals as they were in headwaters that weren't open, weren't funded. We freed up 2,200 additional hospital beds capacity across Ontario. 284 million to address the surgical backlog, again with direct supports to our Ontario hospitals. 700 million for vaccinations specifically related to flu, because we didn't want to have to deal with a high winter flu season as well as COVID. 572 million to further support hospitals, because as we know locally, Headwaters and many Ontario hospitals are now partnering with long-term care homes and assisting when those homes get into outbreak with additional staff. So the staffing supports that come with that. 460 million in temporary wage increases for personal support workers and other pandemic pay individuals. 104, as I said, 104 billion for additional COVID testing in the last 6 months of the fiscal year alone. And again, the personal protective equipment for businesses and for hospitals, long-term care and retirement homes totals $1.4 billion. So that snapshot in time that the Financial Accountability Officer did had a value, but our fiscal goes until the end of March 31st. And of course, I also haven't touched on the supports that have flown through to municipal governments. So in our case, the County of Dufferin has received substantial increases, particularly related to social assistance. So individuals who might need a 1-month assistance for mortgage relief or for rent relief, that money has flown down through to our upper tier municipalities. And if you have a transit system, again, money has gone through the Ministry of Transportation to the municipality who has that transit system impacted because of low ridership. So there's lots of funding from different areas, but the one that I am most interested in talking to you about tonight is, of course, the Ontario Small Business Support Program. And that program is a $1.4 billion program. And what we are discovering is the portal has only been open for less than a week, and we are having very positive uptake on businesses who are applying, and the feedback has been very good. So I would really encourage people to look up that COVID relief package through the Ministry of Finance.
Okay. So it's not so much an issue of holding money back, it's just making sure that you're pacing it appropriately so that it can continue to fund things right up until the end of the fiscal year.
Yeah, and I didn't even talk about the education piece, right? So we are giving direct support to families who have young people in school up to grade 12, $200 per child. And if the child has a disability, then $250. The ability for education in our school systems, we've flowed through additional money so that they could provide tablets when children needed them and all of those supports. So almost every ministry is in some way engaged with their partners to see where the pressure points are and to flow that money. And some of this, of course, is federal money that's come down from our federal partners, and specifically in relation to the education money that has come from the federal government. They were very specific about not allowing it to be distributed until January. So some of it, the feds have said when we can flow, and some of it is just we're trying to be prudent and make sure that if the pandemic has not finished with us by March 31st, which I don't think it will, that we still have the supports available.
Yeah.
Thanks.
We've adopted, on a much smaller scale, obviously, but locally we've adopted a similar approach with the Safe Restart funding from the province at the municipal level. I mean, we certainly didn't spend all of that money but before the end of 2020, and we kept some of it in reserve for this year because obviously, the financial impacts of this pandemic are certainly going to be with us for a while. And as much as those hit people in the pocketbooks at home, that then also flows to the municipal budgets as well. So I certainly understand the rationale there. And like I say, we've adopted a similar approach at the municipal level. Did you want to add anything to that, Kyle, before I move on? Okay.
No.
Okay. So the next question, which was submitted from one of the participants, goes to both panelists. And again, there's a bit of a preamble here and then the question. We can't afford to pay sick leave or take time off from our business. I read an article that said an estimated 58% of Canadian workers don't have access to paid sick leave through their employers, and that number rises to 70% among people making less than $25,000 a year. The sickness recovery benefit would be a pay cut for many, and based on the information I've read, there's growing evidence that workplaces are key sites of transmission for COVID-19. So the question is, what more will be done or can be done to ensure workers and small business owners like ourselves can stay home when they are sick? Sylvia, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'm happy to start. So this is a perfect example of how all levels of government are trying not to work in the same space and duplicate efforts. So I'll set aside the business owner for a moment and talk about the employee. So one of the first things that the Ministry of Labor said was, if you're off as a result of COVID yourself, or self-quarantining or looking after a loved one, then you cannot be fired. So there was some protections put in place right at the beginning of COVID in early April to make sure that that was not happening. The federal government, of course, has most of the responsibility for EI. Yes, there's been a lot of chatter and conversations about should the provincial government be augmenting that program. I frankly worry that we start to duplicate each other's efforts. So we have focused very directly on making sure that people who must stay home or self-quarantine or look after a loved one have that job protected. And the other piece with the small business is, particularly now speaking to that small business owner, the support grants provide a minimum of $10,000 and up to $20,000 to help eligible small businesses owners during the challenging period. And the parameters for that are to being forced to close or significantly restrict services due to the province-wide shutdown, which of course began on December 26th. Have fewer than 100 employees and have experienced a minimum of a 20% revenue decline from comparing April 2020 to April 2019. And the other piece that we modified in the fall economic statement was to ensure that if you opened your business during COVID. So if you had been planning and you opened your business in April, May, June, you still qualify for some supports. Those are all available. And if you have not looked into that portal and to see if you qualify, I would encourage you to do that. It's ontario.ca COVID support. The other piece that we did very early on, specifically related to businesses, was ending the tax on jobs. So the EHT, we have reduced property tax on job creators and leveled the playing field by lowering the business education rates for over 200,000 employees. And we've introduced hydro rebates. So there's a flat rate that we have gone to for hydro, but we've also introduced hydro and propane rebates. So all of those programs are available, and it's important that you don't look at just one piece of it. You make sure that everything that you qualify, you make sure that you look at and access. Small business PPE, they're calling it the Main Street Grant Program. It's $1,000. which seems minor, but it is particularly related to personal protective equipment for your staff. And if you need to modify your business model so that perhaps you have plexiglass up to protect your customers from your clients, you can use that $1,000 for those types of things. So there's a lot out there. The challenging part is to figure out which ones you qualify for, and that's why I'm so pleased that it's all in one portal, that you only have to put in your information once. Thanks, Mayor.
Just before we jump over to Kyle, a couple of comments that have just come on the comments section here, speaking to the small business support program and the requirements for that. So I guess for one of our businesses, when he compares his revenues from April to April, which is the sort of the judgment period, his revenues are only down 7%, so he doesn't qualify under the program. But he's indicating that when he compares May to May, he's down 30%. Why was April chosen as the relevant month?
Because the declaration of emergency and COVID pandemic officially began on March 17th. And so we started with a complete month. So when you go into the portal, you'll have two numbers that you have to put in, the April 2019 and April 2020. But there's other programs that same business could qualify for. And that's the PPE, the Main Street Relief Plan, the Energy Assistance Program. So there are other pieces. It's not just that one small business support grant program.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess the best advice, for our local businesses is get on the portal and spend some time going through it and try to find a program that will match your needs. Okay.
And as I understand it, from speaking to the minister today, the portal is open until 8 p.m. So we are trying to give you some additional capacity and flexibility to make sure that you have the time to do it. But again, what I'm hearing is it takes 20 to 30 minutes if you have all of your paperwork with you. So.
Okay. Kyle, do you want to take a stab at that one?
So with respect to sick leave, there is the Canada Recovery Sickness Benefit that the federal government has announced. Now, it's going to provide you with $500 of income per week. Again, this is before tax. It'll work out to be about $450 after tax. Similar requirements to CERB, have to have had $5,000 of income. They don't say whether that's net or gross, I notice. So they're making the same ambiguous statement there, but let's just say that for now it's gross income. You have to have been unable to work for at least 50% or more of your time, and then you are going to be eligible. And of course, this is unable to work due to COVID, whether that's your self-isolating, your employer has asked you to self-isolate. What I have heard from quite a few people is that the sickness benefit is not enough. It's not enough of an income replacement, especially for people who may have had their income reduced previously in the pandemic. It's something I've taken note of for sure. And it's something that I will be raising as Parliament resumes on Monday. We now have our winter session, which will go until June. And we will be raising this issue because one of the key things that we have to have in this fight is if people are sick, they should know that they will have the financial support to stay at home, not make that difficult choice. Well, I don't really feel great, but I really can't afford to just have $500, $450 of income. So we got to look at ways, I think, to increase that, to make it more likely that people will make the right choice to stay home and not go to work. If you have any questions about that program, again, please get in touch with my office. We're always happy to help people with that application.
Okay, great. There's a couple of other questions here on the comments section. One was quite specific to a local business. They run a dog boarding facility, which also does doggy daycare and overnight boarding. The doggy daycare is not allowed to be open right now, but the overnight boarding is permitted. However, because of the stay-at-home order, no one's traveling, obviously, which means they're not sending their dogs out to be looked after overnight. So the question is, would they qualify for the small business support program? Because technically they're allowed to be open, even though by virtue of the stay-at-home order, there's no customers there to be had.
So unfortunately, the answer to that question is no, because they have not specifically been restricted from opening. I started with there's nothing fair about COVID. There are a number of other examples. We've allowed dry cleaners to stay open as an essential service, but their numbers have plummeted. Individual companies that serve restaurants are also captured in the same way. So I'm afraid I'm the bearer of bad news to say that particular example would not qualify. Although, again, I will say there are other pieces that you should be looking at, like the Main Street Grant Program, and of course the hydro relief, propane, if you use propane. Those programs should be something that you are actively looking at. Thank you.
And then another one from a local business, they're indicating that they seem to be getting different directions from public health and the Ministry of Labor. And they're wondering if one takes precedent over the other, or where they should go to seek clarification on conflicting directions that they're receiving.
So short of having the specific example, I have been able to work through some confusion. There was, for example, in a different part of Ontario, where the local bylaw enforcement officers were telling their riding stables that people couldn't ride their animals. That is not the case. So once I learned of that issue, then I was able to work through both with the Ministry of Health and ultimately the local medical officer of health to resolve that and make sure that the bylaw enforcement officers understood very clearly what the parameters were and are with the stay-at-home order. So we can do that on sort of one-offs. One of the things that I do as Solicitor General is send out all chiefs memos, and those are basically clarifying memos to our law enforcement partners, and the same or very similar memo goes out to municipal CAOs, that they can then in turn make sure that their local bylaw enforcement officers are aware of the rules, because I get it. There's been a lot of changes since March 17th, and some of them have happened very quickly. But we try very hard to update law enforcement and Ministry of Labor inspectors. Perhaps if there is a specific example, you could call my office at 519-941-7751, and we'll try to track down what the issue is. Thank you.
Great. Okay, so we're approaching the end of our hour. There's one other comment here. It's not so much a question, but a comment. But I'll throw it out there, Sylvia, and you can perhaps take it take it back for discussion. So in this particular business owner's experience, he indicates the issue that he sees with using the April to April comparison for the small business support program is that businesses were experiencing shock for longer than only the month of April. Many may have had equity, which allowed them to extend until the end of April, but they faced a reality check later on in the year, and many just didn't have the cash flow or savings to continue. So the suggestion here that perhaps May is a better month, and as I say, I'll throw that out there, and you guys can discuss that. Looks like that is it for questions in the comment section. So would either of you like to make any final remarks before we close out the evening?
If I may, Mayor Mills, first of all, thank you for hosting, and thank you for everyone who has taken an hour out of their evening to hopefully get a little more detail and information. This is a very fast-moving file. I don't think anybody would question how many different changes we have all had to experience as government representatives and, frankly, employers. But I'll end where I started, which is, in Dufferin County and in Caledon, we have always worked very, very hard to drive home the buy local message. And there are opportunities that I hope we can together work on to make sure that that message continues to be amplified. Because there is no doubt that when we have strong communities, once our population is protected from COVID, then we want to make sure that our businesses, our small businesses, our job creators, our employers are out there and active in our communities. So I'm happy to help in any way I can. The Small Business Center in Dufferin County is also available to you. And again, I would just encourage you to really look into that Ontario Small Business Support Grant Program. And if you're having any challenges or you have any questions, please reach out to my office. And I think my number has now been posted on the chat. Thank you. Stay safe, everyone.
Great. Thank you. Kyle?
I just typed in my my email address and put it into the chat, which I'm going to start off with. If you had a question that you didn't get to tonight, please feel free to send me an email, and we'll endeavor to answer that question. I want to echo, what Sylvia has said. We all want to make sure that we support and buy local, and continue to do that and find ways to support our local businesses. These are really challenging times. It's not just challenging for us financially, it's challenging for us psychologically and emotionally. If people are just feeling overwhelmed with the programs or other things that are out there, my staff and I are working very hard. Sometimes we're overwhelmed, but we're never too overwhelmed. If someone is really sort of, I don't know where to go, I don't know how to answer this question, we'd be happy to be your first call or your first email, and we'll work hard to try and help you through whatever difficulty that you're having. As I said at the start, so proud of the residents of Dufferin Caledon who support each other. I look at some of the Facebook groups and other groups, the care groups. We've got some in Shelburne, Orangeville, Caledon, people helping each other out. It's really inspiring. And I think even in the really dark times like we're going through now, there's so many great little beacons of light that we can look at and feel better about and be proud of our community. Keep up the great work, everyone. Great.
Well, I'll add my voice to the choir in two ways. I mean, certainly I echo what Kyle's saying in terms of how proud I am of our community, both within Shelburne and our larger Dufferin County community. To say that the last several months have been difficult is an absolute understatement. It's been much more difficult on some than others, particularly, I'm assuming many of you who are on here tonight who own and operate small businesses. Trying to run a small business in a small town is difficult at the best of times, and then you throw a global pandemic into the mix, and it sure makes life awfully difficult. So I appreciate all of the efforts that have been demonstrated by our local small businesses. And to Sylvia's point, I appreciate the support that our community has shown for our small businesses. When this first started, one of the biggest fears I had was, that we just simply would see a real attrition of our small businesses throughout the community. And fortunately, at least, to this point, that hasn't happened in any, wide scale way. And I credit both businesses and the community for being creative and being supportive. And I hope that continues. And certainly through events like this, and having the support of our provincial and federal partners, I think, just from a comfort level, it's nice to know that you guys have our backs. I know personally you do, and I've, obviously had an opportunity to speak with both of you on different occasions as things come up, and I appreciate that. But I think it's important for the community to know that this really is a wide scale, all hands on deck effort, and I really appreciate what both of you are doing for our riding, for our province, and for our country respectively. So Sylvia, Kyle, I know you've both had long days. So I'll sign off at this point and let you guys go and spend some time with your families and get some rest. But thanks again for joining us tonight, and thanks to everybody who logged in. I truly hope that you got something out of it, and you do have some resources going forward now that you can draw on if you have questions. So with that, thank you all. One final thank you to Carol Maitland, who is the mastermind sort of behind the technical aspect of this tonight. It's certainly above my pay grade. So without Carol, none of this would have happened. So thank you, Carol. And thanks to the rest of our town staff who have been incredible throughout this. So thanks, guys. Good night. Stay well, and we'll see you all soon.
Stay safe.
Good night.